Alrighty, so let's work on step 4 of our decision app. As I had you look at in step 3, what might you update to your decision app? I realized the example I gave was not going to work, and I explain as I get there why it wasn't going to work. But while we look at this, I just want to be clear is that this is a new feature and therefore affects your decision. And as I talked about in week 10, because of the separation of concerns and the design patterns that we've used in this class, they need to stay in place, right? So step 4 needs you integrate this new feature across all your components, but you have to keep these design principles and the separation of concerns. In other words, where did we handle the edit? Where did we handle the delete? Where did we handle the table renderer? Those types of basically what we took from the carbon footprint structure. Again, if you want to ask me about that, please come talk to me, okay? So this is just a section going over that in a little more detail so we're all clear about when I say separation of concerns, just a general description. I don't go through all the functionality here, but right, we're customizing, we're adding a new input and its logic into our decision.js, and it must seamlessly integrate with your decision-making process. In other words, it should be a part of your decision. It can't just be a new input, okay? It actually has to be something that makes you or update that logic, and it has to be meaningful, okay, to affect your output. And then I listed here, right, the separation of concerns, where the app handles the entry point, focusing on initialization, setting up the event listers, and handling submission handlers. The UI basically, in this case, just breaks down the results. It doesn't handle all the DOM, but in that case, we know just when you submit, you get that flash of results. And then you have your your form handler. Of course, this is a really important part of what we're doing, which is getting that form data and giving us back that object. So in other words, all that data structure we've already built needs to be maintained in place, but you will have to modify that because you're going to have to add those things now in your returned object. And of course, the decision logic itself and the table render. Okay, so now on the HTML, right, they'll have a new input, but here's the key is we have an existing ID that we're using for the form. Okay, so I shouldn't really see any unless there's a reason, and you want to specify that reason why you would be using get element by ID, because what we do is we use query selector to then query off of that form ID. Okay, so the whole form has an ID of reference to the document, then we use that to reference the individual fields, and therefore our new field is really why I put that in here. Okay, so now this is, again, just overview here. Now let's actually go into what you need to do. So if you needed to, now this step is only considered optional if, unlike me, your layout of what you were gonna do in step 3 actually is going to be a part of your decision making. What I'm realizing, I don't know if you remember back to my step 3 demonstration, but I was going to do a rate how well that workout suggestion actually worked out. But what I realized is that doesn't impact my decision or the decision for what workout I should do. So I had to reconsider it. I had to rewrite it. Okay, so in this case, if you don't have to, then don't. But if you do, and I don't give you a commit here because what will end up happening is all of that will get captured in this commit and be worth 25 points. But let's go over it, okay? So here is your HTML structure and your raw data capture. So you have a new input, ensure that its raw value is successfully captured by your application. Now in this case, I want you to add a new form input element. So if you use, so as an example, I had, right, number input, I had a drop down, and then I had a radio button. And in this case, I could have used, right, this actually I forced by %, to be a number, but it comes in a string. So what I did is I spent a little time because I actually did think about a really true scenario of what impacts my workouts, and it's my pain. Is like if I have pulled something or if I've overdone it or whatever, my pain goes into my decision making process. So what I ended up doing was finding a fun little element I've never used called the range. And what I did is just a little slider. And then what I did is I wrote an event handler to update that number as the user inputs it. Now, you don't have to do that. Right? But if you what you want to do is use something different than the inputs that you already have. Now, everyone was required to have a minimum of 3. Some of you went and did a few more, so this could be a little more challenging for you, but you need to do something new, okay? Some type of new input you have not done before, right? And again, here are just the different types. So this is what I was talking about above. You know, when you're writing your references to your new inputs, right? You use that ID reference for the form itself, right? You know, to include when you're accessing and submitting, but also when you need your individual inputs. So on your on your form handler, right, modify the functions to read the form data and capture the new values. Make sure you're returning that new that object we already have with these new values, of course, because getting them is great, but if you don't return them, they won't be helpful. So then here's your commit message for that. And so now comes your core logic integration. So this is where we're actually modifying your decision.js for your core new logic. Now, I ended up having to add a whole new section to mine, which I now realize I probably could have wrote and broke down into other functions, so I probably will end up doing that. But I ended up writing so that if I had pain, I immediately returned depending on my pain level. You know, modifications, be mindful. You'll see it in a minute when I show you mine. Okay, so and in this case, this is a repeat of what I said before, is that the new value is meaningful. It changes or influences your final decision outcome, okay? So it must be evident in your output. Okay, so you update your form handler, right? Update the call. So in other words, there's really not a step here. It's just making sure that you'd have that data, right? You update the function call to your decision to pass that new value. It's basically nothing more than we've done before, but of course, anytime you update, and again, we've been through this a couple times with the carbon footprint, here are all the touch pieces that you have to do. Okay, and I was noticing as I was going through this, like storage is not here because we're not really modifying the data. We're not modifying the way the data store is handling. So that just gives you understanding, hopefully there. So now, okay, now, so we do have the display formatting and table rendering, right? So we do, and in this case, I want you to write a new helper function to give you in that table render some user-friendly output, okay? For my range, I ended up writing a new one. It wasn't that hard to figure out how I translated those things, and you'll see it in my form in a minute. Okay, so you update, of course, your table renderer to handle this, right? And then here is your added required helper to format and display new input. And then the last step is we're going to do, of course, the edit and the delete. Yes, you do have to do the inline handling of that, inline confirmation. You still, of course, have to have the storage working. I didn't even bring that up because we've brought the steps forward from that. So in addition to any other UI cleanup you would need to do, you're also going to update your README and your comments. So in this case, now that we've updated our app, we need to now go back through our README and update all the touch points because we've added inputs, we've added new decision logic, so all that needs to be in there. Okay, so ensure the new inputs are fully supported across the UI. So this is kind of your, just where you may need to do a little, and by the way, test. This is really important. Okay, so of course, and I actually put this here realizing you probably could have done just the UI, which is the results maybe up in here. I'm not going to get too crazy about that long as I see them somewhere between these. And then make sure your clear form handles the reset of the state. when it's done. So then update the README to include the new inputs and logic, and update the code comments, because now we have new code. We need to update the corresponding comments. And then, of course, handle your edit and delete. Okay, so here is your commit for that one. So all these are worth 25 points. I definitely recommend if you're coming in late. And I do try to give a couple more days. Now on this one, it's going to end up following. You'll hear me talk about this in attendance, but it'll end up following fall. It'll be on Thursday, just to make it easy. All right, so here's what I did. I showed you this before when I was looking at it. So these are the ones I had before. I ended up just putting the new one down here just because it kind of made sense. So, and I've talked about, I use range here, right? I updated this. Again, you don't have to do this. I just found this to be helpful to the UI that I was building. So if I had 80 and I was on a Thursday and the weather was warm, right? My pain level was, let's say, 45, rich workout, right? And so here's some of the new content because of the pain level. And by the way, notice on this which workout, which by the way needs to match my app specific thing here, or app specific topic. I said be mindful of your movements and listen to your body, right? So in this case, my pain factor, that's what came out of my pain factor, and then I added to my suggestion as well. Okay, so there's just some, and so I could roll up, right? So in this case, I would want to make sure that my edits are actually working here. Maybe I put that down to here, and then to see how that would work. Okay, so I want to make sure everything works. Yep, that works. Yep, that works. Make sure, remember that even though this seems minor, making sure everything does work on your form is important. Okay, I hope this helps you out. Remember, these steps are really important and have the biggest impact on your grades so far. I mean, not more than the technical interview, but take them serious and reach out for help when you need it. I hope you have fun with this. I know I did, more than I expected, honestly, on this one. All right, I'll probably do something around the attendance for this one.